Good morning. I'm going to call the December 9th meeting of the Ad Hoc Parking Committee to order. We have Rob McGreevy with us on Zoom and Manager Brian in the room with me. Bob Weisbord is absent. The first item on our agenda is to approve the November 15th meeting minutes.
We can't do that.
Oh, I can't do that. That's right.
Quorum.
Put on quorum. That's right. We'll have to do that some of the.
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. Yes. Sorry, I forgot about that. All right. Well, first I can ask Rob, did you have any comments on the minutes?
No.
Great.
Actually, sir, here's an idea I have just while we're talking about it.
Sure.
Maybe we can just go ahead and post them to the borough website, but just like we can add some notes then they're like draft and weren't officially approved.
Perfect. I like that idea. Because that way folks can see it. And, you know, because I'm assuming the videos are posted.
Exactly.
So, yeah, so why not have that? Okay, great. The next item is just park mobile usage, and again, it looks, you know, based on the chart that Michelle Carroll provided, it looks like it's just rolling along, so that's great.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see, you know, and as we talked before in relation to total parking meter revenue, what we get from the coins, I'd say right now Park Mobile makes up about a quarter, 1/4 of what we bring in. I'll be interested to see as we go into next year whether that changes or not, whether that continues to increase or whether it kind of stays around that level. If it stays around that level, maybe at some point I'll want to talk with, you know, with officials in the borough about whether we want to try and get that number up or not, or whether we're fine with it being at that level.
Right, that makes sense. That makes sense. Rob, I just thought of something. I meant to mention, I'll make some notes to make minutes from this meeting from, because I think most of what we're going to be talking about later are things I'm going to be making notes on anyway to communicate thoughts to Solicitor Walco as he's drafting the ordinance. So.
Okay, thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the public parking map. I assume that's just still in progress.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. And we have no action items anticipated for Borough Council. We have a number of items that we wanted to discuss around parking, especially around residential parking. The one that we were hoping to talk about today but won't be able to because the data is still being gathered is discuss what the existing enforcement periods are for the 2-hour regulated zones and see if we can come up with a more simplified set of enforcement periods, because right now we have quite a menu that you can select from, and it's just it's more complicated than it needs to be, at least it appears. So when you drive around the streets and see some of the signs, and so we wanted to look at, is there a way to harmonize that a little bit and make it a little simpler? So that will have to wait until we have the data for that. So that's it. We have to table that. Just going through the agenda in the order that I just put things there, no order, a particular order of importance. The committee talked about, or recommended to council, and council agreed that while we're giving people, we have a method for people to request a new 2-hour zone, that it would be good to have a process for them to remove a 2-hour zone. And we proposed, through the discussion with council, that came up with the proposal of having 60% of the residents petition to have the 2-hour zone designation removed, that removal then would be done on like a trial period for some period of time, and then at the end of that trial period, the residents, they would have to submit a new petition, again with 60% or more of the residents requesting it. So it's kind of like giving them a chance to see, well, what is it like if we don't have the 2-hour designation? The one thing we didn't settle on is like, what period of time should that trial period be? And I didn't know, Rob, if you had any thoughts on that?
Not really. I mean,
Okay.
I like on the south side, the dynamics won't change until SEPTA charges for parking. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so.
and it'll change again when the bridge opens. The dynamics will keep changing.
Yeah, and so I think the thing is we want to select a period that's long enough to give people a chance to realize, because what we're going to do is cover up the signs so that it won't say, 2-hour parking anymore. And also stop enforcing in those blocks. And so you want the period to be long enough so that people who wouldn't have parked there before are now like, oh, I could park here all day if I wanted to, or whatever. And so to my mind, I mean, I think that needs to be at least 3 months, but I wonder if it should be even a little longer, like 6 months, because I really would hate to see this pattern of blocks petitioning to have it taken away. They don't get enough experience of what it is really like with the protection taken away. And they come back then, not long after they had it successfully removed, saying, please add it back. And we have to do a traffic or a parking, a utilization study, because that's part of the adding it back. You need to have 60% or more of the residents request it, and the utilization needs to be, I think it's 60% or more as well. And so we'd have to there's some work that would have to be done, and I'm just trying to avoid a lot of churn. So I'm wondering if a longer period is the way to maybe prevent that.
Well,
I guess sorry, Rob, you go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say I didn't realize that we would incur a cost to reinstate the zone, for a traffic study of some kind. Is that what you're saying?
A traffic study of parking utilization. So somehow we'll have to gather that data to see, is this block parked up?
Yeah, and I think that a 90-day time period would allow for the time to do that.
So you think 3 months is a reasonable time frame to gather that, and if then a block comes back and says we changed our minds, what is involved in that parking utilization analysis to see how parked up the street is? Is that like, are we having to go outside to our traffic engineers? Yeah, okay. So it's some cost, yeah.
Yeah, I think the main thing is setting the threshold request high enough to avoid, no request is frivolous, but high enough of a threshold to justify the expense the borough is going to incur, but also not so high that it's going to completely prevent people from being able to explore it. And I think 60% is really good. I mean, we ran into, Rob and I ran into the Public Health and Safety Committee. Our original traffic request policy only required like one person, and it was like, I think we had like one meeting where we had like 9 traffic complaints to address on the agenda, and we raised it to 3, and I think that's worked out a lot better. And so I think in this sense, for whatever it's worth, to me, this is a policy decision, but to me, the 60% threshold that you've already kind of talked about, I think will take care of that problem.
Okay. So I'm fine with 3 months, and it sounds like Rob.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to limit the costs. I hadn't realized that. I don't want to be spending lots of money to do traffic studies or parking utilization studies. Yeah.
Well, and here's the other thing too, is that if that's what if that's what starts happening, council can change that threshold. They can change But maybe instead of 60% of the residents requesting, it needs to be 70 or 80%, or, you know, if it looks like that's getting too onerous, you know, like if it's happening too much. It's been interesting. I don't think there's been a request for a new 2-hour zone in about 5 years. It's been quite a while, so it may not be something that we see brand new requests for, but I wonder about this, you know, how many blocks are actually going to ask to have it removed? We don't know. We don't know whether that's really going to happen. Because there's got to be some people on the block who are sign this petition, and they say, do you really want to take it away? Have you thought about why we don't have a problem with parking on our block? It's because we have the 2-hour zone already. So, you know, I think maybe the residents of the block talking amongst themselves may also help mitigate the knee-jerk reaction, oh, let's just take it away. And when they'll then later regret it because they find, oh yeah, it did give us protection, didn't it? And the other piece that is good about this is Solicitor Walco said these kinds of things, so the addition and removal of zones, he said that's all an administrative function and that doesn't need to be in the ordinance. So if council wanted to change that, they could. Well, that's what he said.
Honestly, I don't know.
Oh, you're not so sure about that?
No, I'm not disputing
Well,
the legal. I'm sure we legally could do that.
Could we put it in resolutions to make it more?
I just would definitely want it written down somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no. No, that's absolute. So I think resolution is fine. I think that makes sense. His point was those are all. Some of these things are really more administrative functions, so they don't really need to be in the ordinance. Like his feeling was the map of the zone of the neighborhoods doesn't need to be in the ordinance because that's kind of an administrative thing. But the streets that are regulated need to. Yeah.
So if we don't put it all in the ordinance together,
yeah.
I agree. Maybe legally we don't have to, and you're right that if we put it in the ordinance, then it would require an ordinance, you know, to either remove it or update it. I guess I just want to make sure, how are we gonna keep track of everything if it's in different places? And especially too, like the benefit of putting it on ordinance is then it's all on E-code as well, where people can look it up online.
That's true. I know what, so if we put it in resolution, that's, you know, one way, then you could say, well, you need the resolution going with the ordinance, and we're going to need that anyway because our, you know, some of the fees and things are not going to be in the ordinance, but that's kind of doing that already in general. I know when I was on Borough Council the first time, when we were talking about E-code, there was talk about having that house our resolutions as well, and I still would love to see that.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
So even though I share your understanding about your desire to have everything in one place, I still think the resolutions need to get into E-code because there are things in resolutions that you really want to be able to historically see. So anyway.
So I guess my advice would be, at least on, you know, just on this one particular topic, I do think the process for adding or removing is, I do think that should all be in ordinance.
Okay, well, I will pass that feedback back to John, and we'll have to make sure. So this
And
is
I
where.
can talk to John as well.
Yeah,
about that.
sure.
And sorry I missed that in the conversation.
We didn't really get that feedback from him until yesterday afternoon when he sent the draft ordinance to you and me. So it's still really early and it's forming, so. So one of the other things that I think I just want to verify my reaction to a question that a resident raised, which was, well, yeah, that seems obvious to me, but maybe this would need to be in the ordinance then, but that someone who lives on a street, that this isn't on the agenda because I thought of it later, someone who lives on a street, on the side of the street that is designated no parking through the no parking because we're trying to create emergency routes, that the Public Health and Safety Committee identified all those and put those in an ordinance. The folks living on that side of the block can't ask for a 2-hour regulated parking on their side of the street because it's already restricted as no parking.
I do not follow.
Okay, so if I live on the side of the street that is designated no parking at any time,
Mhm.
I can't come to the borough and say, I want you to put a 2-hour regulated permit parking on that block.
Right.
And so
How
that,
many blocks like that are there in the borough though?
well, there's a lot of no parking allowed streets on
Yeah.
one side.
South Essex.
Yeah. I mean, there's a good number of them where
I'll
you,
keep an eye out for that.
there's enough. I mean, there's enough that there might be somebody who could say, well, I want that on my side of the street. And it's like, but you can't because we need that because of having emergency routes in and around, I forget how many streets that was, but it wasn't a insignificant number that was in the ordinance. It was,
Well, I think that would be a separate process through public health and safety. If anyone has a concern about, I mean, we've heard different concerns in our committee about.
I mean, I don't know. I'll admit, like, I would not be, with all due respect to our residents, I mean, like, I know it's quite inconvenient for a number of them, but, I'm sure there was and is reason that those situations exist. And
well, that was recently looked at because that was council recently,
are you talking about snow emergency routes?
well, just the no parking at any time routes. Those, where there's,
Oh, yeah.
so like on.
When we looked at, exactly. So when we created the ordinance to actually enforce, our no parking areas, I asked, professional staff,
Right.
here's an opportunity if you want to change any of these. And they felt pretty confident that they should be where they are. And given that we so recently went through that exercise, but again, with all due respect to our residents, there's like a reason
Right.
why they are that way. And so I don't know, I would not like to create a process where that could be changed.
That was my feeling, my just sort of like, well, no, the no parking allowed at any time kind of trumps everything. You don't get to,
That's fine. Yeah, no, all I was remembering was just people came to our committee about the snow routes. We kind of addressed that already. I'm not saying we need a new process. Yeah.
Well, and to me, that's a different process. The snow emergency routes are no parking when there's a snow emergency. These other, like the side of, I hate this, it always drives me crazy. I have to think really hard. I guess it's the east side of North Essex is you can't park along there. If you go up from Windsor up to, I don't know if you can, I think it's up to Sabine. Maybe you can park on that side, on the other side of Sabine, but there's no parking there. And I think it's just, we know that there's buses that go up and down that street, and there's, it's a way to promote safety, but also I'm guessing it's a main road in and out for the fire trucks, and so I'm assuming that's why those were designated that way a long time ago, because those signs have been there for a long time. Anyway, all right, I just wanted to make sure I was not thinking the wrong thing for that, because that I think should be in the ordinance that but make sure that that the ordinance doesn't look like it allows you to request a 2-hour zone on one of those blocks. That's all. So then it's okay to move on to the next item. Okay. The question of, especially if we're going to have this in the ordinance, and maybe the answer for this is that, well, we can't actually figure out how to address every situation, so we have to allow some discretion somewhere, is if somebody is asking to add or remove a 2-hour zone for a block that has either no residences on it, parking on it, or just a couple of residences, or if you're a corner property, so it's like how we had some people come with their, send emails with it, well, this is where I live, how would this work, or would people who live along a block where all the residences, it's the back of the property that faces a street, could they request 2-hour parking on that block, even though that's the back of their residence, not the front?
Yes, I think one of those questions I feel like is easier to answer than the other.
Yeah.
We may split that apart. So the one question is, what if I only have I'm just making up numbers here, 0 to 4 properties, on the block. Well, flash for the 0, I think that's easier to answer than few. So I would say that it just defers to whatever language we have already about your eligibility for a 2-hour parking zone and how your address is determined for that.
Yeah.
That's what I think would determine whether you can ask for a 2-hour zone on your block. And so, I forget what the ordinance exactly says, but I know in the office, even under the current system, we have people who come in who are I live on the corner of such and such street, and I forget, there's a certain process that Michelle and Missy go through to make sure that the person is eligible for a 2-hour permit.
Right.
So I would say just that same situation would apply.
So that would, to me, would say, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's it.
Would say that if this is a block where the only residences along it are the back of properties, they don't front on that, so they don't get to control that block.
Right.
And that makes sense to me. And for a corner property, I guess it would be it's where your address is. Even if you think you'd like the 2-hour zone on the other side.
That is how it works, yeah.
Okay. Does that make sense, Rob?
Yeah, there's just a few of these situations. I think council can decide. If I'm thinking of South Essex, if there's a block with just one residence, and we need to use that as a regulated zone, we can make that happen. We don't need to have a new established process.
Well, I think that just the question is, if that person wanted to request a 2-hour zone in their block, and they're the only residence that fronts on that block, how do they get 60%?
Oh yeah, no.
It's them. But is that, are we?
They're 100%.
Exactly. Okay. So because that was one of the questions too. Do I need more? What do I need for that? So.
And I think one of the things we've talked about this ordinance as well as other ones in the time I've been here is an ordinance is not going to be able to capture every single 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 scenario that's going to happen. And I think I think this is what Rob was saying is in those 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 situations, Borough Council can use, common sense to, figure out what to do about it.
No, and hopefully it never gets to Borough Council. Hopefully there's an obvious, answer to it too. Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to make sure we were not missing something there that we would want to get into, especially put it in ordinance, make sure we get all that before we get it all drafted and adopted. Okay. The next couple of items kind of go together in some ways in the sense that we're talking about ways to, penalties that we could have in place to make sure that people aren't abusing either 2-hour regulated parking or the guest pass program. And we had asked Solicitor Walco for some ideas on that, and included that in the draft ordinance that he sent yesterday afternoon, and so I sent that language, just pulled that out and sent it to you guys, and wanted to see what your thoughts were on that. This is the language that he has in here around the 2-hour zones. Also, it mirrors what he's proposing for metered parking. So when we talk about that, we could keep that in mind. But maybe first we could talk about his guest parking. Ed? All right. Did I get everything in here? Oh, shoot. There it is, yeah. Okay, it's in, sorry. I'm still not totally familiar with this because I've only read it through a couple times. It's in this section D where he's saying that that there would be penalties for either for if you misrepresent that a person is your residential invitee, when that person is not your visitor, invitee, or guest. And he's suggesting that there be a fine for that, and that also if you're found to be, he says, upon conviction, and I'm like, not quite sure, do you take that person to court at some point, but that they would be excluded from receiving future parking permits. And so his suggestion of a fine for someone making this misrepresentation is a $500 fine. Now, I don't know that we have $500 fines for many things, so that seemed kind of high to me. I think we have a fine of $300 for towing if you're parked in the snow emergency route, because, well, it's a fine for that because that recoups the cost of towing. But I don't know that.
Well,
So I'd kind of like to know what other people think, because I was just like,
just before, sorry, Rob, just to kind of lay some, ground rules or expectations, just to clarify, unlike fees, fines do not have to be based on the actual
True.
cost to provide a service, because they're intended for deterrence.
That's true.
And then your other fact-based question, no, I can't think of anything else. Well, actually, two other fact sort of things here. No, I can't think of much of anything else in the borough. It's a $500 fine. And number three is, yes, technically everything that we fine or issue a citation for could ultimately go to court.
That's what I thought. Okay, thanks. Yes, that is correct, but I think my thinking about the fine for parking in a snow emergency is that that's quite a change from what we currently have, and the reason we set it at that high level was we were also recognizing, well, we're going to be towing you, so yeah. So anyway, Rob, I'd like your thoughts on what Solicitor Walco proposed as just a starting point.
Yeah, well, I think a fine is appropriate. I mean, that's what we discussed when we lowered the guest permit fee to $0. We discussed the idea of a fine for the, 1 in 1,000 folks that might violate the program. So I think this is a high fine, but I think it would work as a deterrent. So it would allow us to have the zero fee permit, guest permit program, which is one of our, goals. We've agreed on that. So I think this is the kind of a necessary component of the program.
Okay. That makes sense to me. Did you have any other thoughts about anything else about the guest pass penalty? I mean, to me, both of these things capture what we were thinking: the fee or the fine, excuse me, and the preventing you from getting future permits.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That part, preventing future permits, I don't know. I mean, people should be allowed to make one mistake, I guess, but I don't know.
So I asked I mean, we could certainly write the ordinance to say like, upon second conviction, first conviction's $500 fine, second conviction, you lose your, you lose your ability to participate in the program.
Yeah. Is that first conviction or just first violation?
They're technically the same thing.
Oh, are they? Okay.
Well, we'll defer to John on that, but my understanding is when someone pays, whether it's like a parking ticket or, or bigger still, like a speeding ticket or something, paying the fine is equivalent to admitting,
Okay.
is equivalent to it being a conviction.
Okay. That makes sense.
I'm not, just for anyone watching the recording, I'm not a lawyer, so that's what I'm saying.
I'm
There's
gonna ask,
controversy
yes.
about that.
Yes, we will ask, but that kind of makes sense, because that is kind of, okay, yeah, I did this, and so, yeah. That makes sense. Okay, so he's also suggesting that penalty framework would be the same if someone intentionally misrepresented their personal address to get a residential parking permit. And I know we wanted that kind of, we wanted something to prevent that as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify for everybody, I mean, what we're talking about is that intentional
Yeah.
Okay.
misrepresentation. You're trying to kind of buck the law,
Yep.
as opposed to just, forgetting to register your guest.
Yeah,
Right?
that's
I mean, that's like I think, going to be a common mistake.
Mhm.
And the ticket for that, what would that be, Barbara? Do we have a?
That's the $20 for
That's the
parking for over parking in a 2-hour zone when you don't have a permit.
Right. So, and that's kind of in line with current practice, isn't it? Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's.
So the only real change here is just for someone who, the $500 fine is for that very exceptional case that we hope really doesn't happen at all.
Right, I mean, the way this is worded, it's unlawful for any person to intentionally misrepresent their address, someone else's address, or that they're a residential invitee. So it's this intentionally misrepresent that we're talking about here. Not I forgot to register you, or oops, I didn't realize that I was past the 2 hours. I thought I was only going to be here for 2 hours, and I ended up here for an hour. For 3 hours. That's not what this is at all. This is the gaming the system thing. So does it make sense to have parallel treatment then for someone intentionally abusing the guest pass system have the same treatment for someone intentionally abusing the 2-hour parking permit program, as well as someone intentionally abusing the guest pass program? And again, I think, as you said before, this is like a 1 in 1,000 kind of situation. So I can see the benefits to having parallel treatment, just to make it simpler.
What do you mean, Barbara, by parallel treatment? Do you mean
The same fine upon first conviction, and then the second conviction would be you can't apply for permits.
Well, we'll be in Sam. I'm trying to remember the context of all the different things we've talked about with parking, of how someone be intentionally misrepresenting themselves with residential. I guess you're talking about like if someone's like intentionally like registering their fourth car and they say it's their first or something like that, or
Yeah, or well, this says misrepresenting their address, so actually I don't know that that isn't in here, but, so like somebody who doesn't live on a 2-hour zone says, oh, no, I do, claims they live on a 2-hour zone so they can park around the corner for some reason, we wanted to prevent that, because that's not fair to the people who live in that 2-hour zone.
the only thing I would say in that case, obviously, like, The second thing of like not being on your permits wouldn't really affect you in that
That's true.
situation.
It doesn't.
Because the whole point is you weren't able to get them,
Right.
you're lying to get them.
Right, so it really only affects the person who lives, who's misrepresenting their guest.
Right. But I mean, yeah, I mean, just keeping a, $500 fine again,
Yeah.
not for, I want to be clear, but not because you accidentally picked the wrong box when, registering for your permit or something like that, or you forgot to get a permit again, that's, hey, we'll let you know if you need to fix it or whatever, or, or whatever. But this is, you don't live on a 2-hour zone and you intentionally put down an address that you know is in a 2-hour zone in order to get a permit.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we're okay with what Solicitor Walco proposed there for that. And, this is going to be looked at more by more, I mean, this isn't the last chance for anything to be done with this. I mean,
I'm sure as we've seen throughout this process, that once it goes to Borough Council,
Yeah.
I'm sure Borough Council as a whole will have comments.
So there will be, yes, I'm sure there will be things that, I mean, I know Borough Council agreed in principle to, yes, there would be penalties for these things, but the question, then when you actually see it in writing, then you start thinking about, well, what does it mean? So, but I think for now, we've got something that we can leave in the draft ordinance as is for review, so, okay. The other part that we asked Solicitor Walco to address was how we could have escalating penalties for people who are abusing parking in a metered parking space or parking in a 2-hour zone. And what we mean by that is someone who parks at a parking meter and just keeps feeding the meter all day, gets one ticket and says, fine, I'll pay $20, I don't care. Because right now, they can't get more than one ticket.
Well, or vice versa, without paying the meter at all.
Well, that's true. Yes, that's true. Yeah, why would you even, why would you even feed it? Yeah, you could just, you get one ticket and you're like, okay, fine, I don't need to feed the meter anymore. But I think some people feed the meter and don't, I don't think that they're fooling.
Like, I think the cleaner scenario talk about is just if you just
Yep.
or just left your vehicle in a 2-hour zone, it's like, okay,
Right, well,
I
that's
paid
the
one
other
ticket or whatever.
Yeah, and the other one is you park in a 2-hour zone knowing that you're going to be there for all day. You're like, I'll get one ticket and fine, I'll pay it. So John recommended an escalating schedule, and again, we'll need to decide whether I like the idea of escalating. Do we like the parameters he's laid out? We can talk about that. But his recommendation was that, if you exceeded your parking time up to an hour, that's $20. And then so he's like, and I'm like, I don't know how you measure this, Then he was saying 1 to 2 hours, $40, and so he had this escalating like this, and I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I was thinking that, I'm sorry, I know you have to
No, I
say it
just
out loud
wasn't
because
sure
other
how it
people
was
have
going to
seen
work.
it.
I was like, I'm not quite sure
I
how we
think
do that.
I think the way we had originally talked about would just be like you would just get like additional tickets.
Yeah,
Like, I think that if we could do that, I think that's a lot more, from my perspective, a lot more straightforward. And also if our software, I don't know if our
I wonder.
ticketing software could accommodate that. I would almost rather see something that says, and this will answer, I think, the other question John had for us, the bird solicitor had for us. I think it should just be like, every 2 hours that you're not in compliance, whether it's a meter or a 2-hour zone, you could get another $20 ticket.
yeah, that's kind of what I was expecting too. So I was like, But thoughts, Rob?
Yeah, well, that makes sense to me. Because it'd be hard to keep track of,
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems much harder to enforce.
Right. That's what I thought. I was like, I'm not sure how we do that. But
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's not a position I'd want to necessarily put the parking enforcement team in either.
Yeah, that seemed like a little bit too much. Now, the other thing he added, because we know that there are some places in the borough where the 2-hour zone parking is sometimes kind of flagrantly ignored. And hopefully giving extra tickets like that will be enough. But, there might be situations where maybe that isn't, I don't know. So John added an additional penalty that if a vehicle remains parked in a permitted area for a period of X hours or more, and he's leaving that blank for us to fill in, I'm not quite sure. All right, well, anyway, that you're there for more than a certain period of time, that the vehicle may be towed by the borough without prior notice or additional delay. And so, I was, do we want to do that? Is there a time limit that we'd want to put on that? Or is this something we might want to, wait and see whether the ability to write more than one ticket fixes the problem?
If I may, I would like to have that option. I'm not necessarily saying we would do it off the bat, but I would like to have that option. I was thinking 24 hours, like almost a sense of like, if our parking team writes them a ticket, they go to work the next day, the same vehicle is still there. And I think that fits in, I have to look back what our towing ordinance says, but I think in other situations as well, I think that's about the same. I would say whatever time frame our current towing ordinance has from when we can, tow a vehicle. I would say the same for this as well.
Okay.
So
So,
I'll be on E-code now.
I was like, it's probably in here in what I've got printed out. What was I going to say?
So, Barbara, I wanted to ask about this because, most of our streets have enforcement hours, say, of 9 to 6 or something. So how exactly would this, if we said 24 hours, 12 of those hours aren't being enforced anyway, because it's, you know what I mean? So how do we count?
That's part of what I'm saying 24 as well. I think just aside from the enforcement hours, I think that would deal with people who have either just left their vehicle or people, and I mean, the towing ordinance talks about abandoned vehicles, but also people who have decided that they're gonna just every day just, do whatever they want.
Yeah.
That way we have the option to tow them instead of going through even though we would be writing them a ton of tickets, it would just be like, okay, well, we're not playing this game today. Like you're out of here.
I think
I guess I just don't have a clear example in my head of how, if someone...
Well, let's say someone works somewhere in the borough or something like that and has decided to park in a 2-hour zone. Right now all that would happen, and let's say they do it every day. Let's say they have a job where, like 8:30 in the morning, they're parked in a 2-hour zone, and they're not leaving that 2-hour zone until like 5:30 or 6 o'clock every day. And when they go home, they come back, park in the same sort of area at 8:30 the next morning and stay all day. Right now, what would happen to that person is that they would get a single $20 ticket for each day. Under this new system, if we went kind of what we talked about a minute ago, they would get $100 in tickets each day. And if we had the towing thing as well, so let's say, again, they're parked there at 8:30 to 5:30 or whatever, they decide, okay, well, let's just say for whatever reason, they're okay with paying $100 today, or if they're just like, I'm just not going to pay this and, whatever, why should I care? Which there are lots of reasons you should care. For anyone who watches this later, it does go to court and your driver's license gets suspended ultimately if you don't do anything about it. But let's say for whatever reason they just decide to go through all that anyway. That'll give us the ability to say, okay, well, I don't care if you left or not. Like 24 hours ago, your vehicle was in this 2-hour zone. And, you know, so you clearly like don't care about the rules, or the fines we have just don't matter enough, and we just need to get you out of here so that, and because again, the whole purpose of this is so we have parking for the people who need it.
Pay for it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I understand. So even though they're not parked there for 24 hours, you know, they didn't park there overnight, but then they come back and they do the same thing the second day that they did the first day. And it's at that point that things escalate.
And I will say that's a little bit different. Actually, I will say that is a little bit different than like how we handle the 100 Conway parking lot. Because like actually I don't, for now, I mean, you know, it's not a problem if someone like, you know, during the day, if someone like works downtown and wants to park down that lot,
Right.
you know, the problem with that lot then becomes when vehicles are just forever parked there, and that we designed that ordinance accordingly. Whereas, yeah, this is designed with a different sort of goal in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think for people listening, like the goal is not to be draconian in their, you know, fines and towing, you know, but the goal is to, you know, make the best use of very limited space, right? We're very, very densely settled borough centered around the train station. We're trying to make this all work. And so we need a high functioning parking program.
Right, and we're wanting to be sensitive to the residents who have come to Borough Council in the past and said, we need help parking close to our homes. We're not able to do it because of the needs of businesses in the area, or the train parking lot, or other things. And that's why the 2-hour zones were put in place in the first place. And where we see people abusing those systems, I think we need to try to have some penalties that discourage that.
So, yeah, our existing towing ordinance does say 24 hours. And it actually already says the motor vehicle is parked in violation of a posted parking regulation.
And the language that's in this section talking about towing does say the vehicle may be towed. It doesn't say.
True, we don't have that. It's like, we're not gonna like, I mean, even with the towing ordinance we have now, we just didn't immediately start towing everyone's vehicle. Like, we gave people notices, like, you know, it just for an extreme situation, we can do this, but that doesn't mean we will do this.
Right, exactly. Okay. All right, so I think we have an answer on that. Anything else on?
I got a hard stop in like 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you're welcome to continue about that.
But yes, I think we're almost, so there was the question that had come up again from a couple residents concerned that the guest pass program how are contractors who are doing some work at my house affected by that? Do they have to have permits? And right now they don't have to have permits. The existing guest pass program says they're exempt from this. And so then the question that got raised a couple of times was, well, should there be a program for registering, or a process for registering the contractor so they don't get errant tickets, you know, ones that really that are improperly written because they don't know that they're a contractor. The question that came to my mind, Manager Bryant, was whether that was even a problem. Are we seeing tickets being written that shouldn't have been because somebody was a contractor and parked in a 2-hour zone for 4 hours?
Yeah, I would say that thankfully it's a pretty rare problem, and I mean, whenever it does happen, I mean, that's a situation where, you know, someone comes by the office and you know, we can figure that out.
Okay, so.
But I think in my time working here, obviously I'm not the primary person dealing with this, but I would say I've only maybe seen it once or twice happen.
Okay.
And it's usually if a contractor is like using a vehicle that like doesn't have like some sort of logo or
Yeah.
something on it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like there isn't a need right now for an actual process for them to register.
Not at this time, but it certainly could became a problem we could figure out.
Okay. That's what I figured. Okay. Well, given that we don't have much time left,
Actually, a question I said, I have to go downstairs in a few minutes. I mean, I could continue to participate on Zoom.
okay.
But I also don't know what Rob's schedule looks
Yeah,
like.
I know. I think Rob has to hop off pretty quickly, right? Pretty on time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So what I was just going to say is, we have other items on here. At the moment, we don't have any future meetings scheduled for this committee, and I'm not sure what next year will bring that way. So I'm wondering if we want to talk about any of these things, or amongst the three of us, or whether there's the other issues that are on here. Manager Bryant, you and I can just make suggestions to council president, or how we handle these.
I think what I'd like to do, Rob, if this is okay with you, is I'd like to work with Barbara on like pulling a list of like what things are still outstanding. And then Barbara and I can talk with council president about the best method to address those outstanding items.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Well, I see those outstanding items, and there may be more that come up, but the draft ordinance and resolutions and how those get, put together and get before council. Then once that's adopted, the whole rollout of it and educational materials, and where there might be some room for someone on council to be involved, and the private parking lots and the reserve space application process, and the public parking map, and then maybe updates periodically on park mobile usage through some committee or something. But I don't see much else. But I'll work on that. I'll see.
Yeah, we can work together on that.
Yeah,
Talk
yeah.
to Fred.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I will adjourn the meeting, and
No, my thanks to you too as well for just the time you'd spent on this.
you're welcome.
And Bob,
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you both. Yeah, and Barbara for leading us. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks, Rob.